This is ZEISS Presents Full Exposure, the weekly resource for news, trends, and the people who influence the world of photography and cinematography. Hosted by veteran photographer and filmmaker Jim Kamp.
On this episode of Full Exposure, we pay another visit to one of our favorite Manhattan locations, the Union Square Daylight Studio of photographer Andrew French. We spoke with Andy about the amazing light in his studio in episode 7. He hosts portrait and figure workshops in this, one of the few remaining North Light studios in New York City. Andy.
Jim.
We're back.
It's great. Good to see you.
It's great to see you, too. Thanks for having us back.
Yeah.
So, when you first came on, we talked about your workshop. And, of course, we couldn't get to see it and couldn't get to see it in action, which we will do today. But tell me a little bit how you started it. And, of course, a lot of people here that have watched the show know your space by now because we've been here a couple times. Does it have something to do with the space?
I had a couple friends who were on this floor, and I'd visited them and saw the windows and just flipped out. And then a space became available, and I shared it with someone who was actually a video editor.
Oh, really?
And then he left, and I got the lease, and so I think I've been here 20 years.
Wow.
But it's the light, man.
Yeah.
The light is just.
Yeah.
I mean,
as we can see, it's falling on you.
Yeah. It's
wonderfully.
Unbelievable light.
So, how did the workshop start, though? You weren't doing workshops when you first started.
No, the workshops. I've been teaching at ICP for over 20 years, and they're always looking for new ideas. And so I thought, well, why don't I teach? This is even before I was shooting much here. Why don't I teach a workshop here? There were like 2 or 3 empty studios on the floor that the spaces just weren't rented. So made a little negotiation with the super, and I got to use the spaces for a day to teach this workshop. And that was the catalyst. I'd been teaching, artificial lighting workshops at ICP for a long time. But I'd never seen anything about shooting in a daylight studio. And so I pitched it and wrote up something, and it's been really successful ever since.
Well, when you started out, that's kind of how you started, basically, right? Was lighting as a first assistant, lighting for well-known portrait photographers and so on.
Exactly.
So did you ever have the opportunity to shoot in natural light in a place like this?
No. It was unusual if you found a studio that had daylight. And this is the 80s, so everyone was using soft boxes and,
right.
Or you'd shoot in a rental studio. But one photographer I assisted shot a lot of daylight. And so she would seek out a daylight studio to shoot. But that was 1 out of 60, 70, almost no one. Now, certainly there are location shoots and people would shoot natural light outside.
Right.
But in an enclosed space with window light as the main source, as kind of captured and becomes directional. No, when I was assisting, no, I can't think of anyone. Isn't it funny?
Yeah, no, I couldn't really think of it either. I mean, I didn't do anywhere near the amount of assisting you did, but I never even set foot in a place like this before till we reconnected, and so it's really a delight.
Totally.
So tell me about your workshops, and do you get all different levels, skill levels of photographers that come in?
Anyone who is interested in learning about daylight shooting in a daylight studio is welcome to come. So it's all levels. So it's people who are shooting for a living, and it's people who they just do it as an avocation or a weekend or pure pleasure are welcome, and everyone takes a workshop, and some people get it right away, and some people come in and see, well, it's only about 16 by 16. It's got these 14-foot ceilings, and by the end of even the end of the first day, the people are kind of having a little bit of an epiphany. There's one student who, an epiphany, and they saw the light.
They saw the light.
They saw the light. There's one student who took the workshop, and I think this is I only have one example of this, where the first day she was shaking her head. I just don't get it. I don't see it. I just don't understand it. And the second day in the morning, we show images. People do a little edit. We show images from the first day and have some coffee. And she showed her images and saw the people's images and totally had this kind of epiphany that, oh my gosh, now I see it. It's very simple. I think that the realization happens in a daylight studio like this because there are no distractions. I mean, it's the same kind of light that you'd find in a room with a window. It's broader and bigger.
Very, and very sky focused as opposed to side focused.
Totally. So there's nothing in the way.
Mm-hmm.
But I think people people see it in a different way because there's no distractions. I think that's.
Yeah,
that's
I remember you had said that before. And the other thing is that I think that even established shooters might seem freak out about, which I didn't really freak out about, but I kind of like, oh yeah, right. Like you can't move the light.
So you move the subject around the light.
Right.
You don't move the light around the subject.
Right.
And I talk about that at the beginning of the workshop. There's a studio down the hall that we used to shoot in, and a friend of mine rented it for years. And Annie Leibovitz rented the studio for a Vanity Fair shoot on Hollywood couples. And it was a picture of Sam Mendes and Kate Winslet. And so they rented a couple other rooms for wardrobe, for staging and hair and makeup. And after the shoot, I went to the assistants and I said, how did it go? Did she like it? She had brought risers into the studio to bring the level up, that people would be a little higher and wouldn't be quite as top lit. And they said that she did not like it. She had brought strobes, I think, but and so when the story ran just in case. So when the story ran at Vanity Fair, there's about 8 pages, and they're beautiful portraits. Like her work is just so stellar, and the light is just gorgeous. And there's this one image which is very different from the rest of the shoot. The rest of the shoot was artificial light. There's this one image shot in the daylight studio, and it's quite blue, very soft, and wraps around very nicely. But the assistant said no, she didn't like it. So the rest of the story was not shot in that studio. Shot elsewhere.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
And they didn't try to match the tonality.
Strangely enough, they didn't. I mean, certainly, maybe something happened. I don't know that it's necessarily, maybe it's not her doing or her decision. It could be a magazine issue. Yeah. But it's noticeably different, and still is a beautiful picture. But
so the focus on your workshop is what? Portrait?
Mostly portrait-based.
Figure work.
If I do a figure workshop, it's certainly, again, it's kind of a figure portrait in that sense. It could be something abstract, but the light just wraps around a face or a body so beautifully. So at the moment, those are the 2 workshops I do in these studios: a portrait-based workshop, or kind of a how to shoot in a daylight studio, and then the figure workshop. But the first couple hours are going over kind of historic images and talk about the mechanics of north light, which just is north light, and why people like the indirectness of north light, and the color temperature and how it changes through the day if there's a cloudy day. And then the rest of the time is people playing. I'm a real fan of people learning and shooting and playing. We don't have like one setup where I say, this is where this person should stand, and here's the where you should stand, and everyone can rotate here and take a picture. Everyone has 5 minutes. It's a little, people are assigned the model, and they rotate models, about 2 people every model. And they're on their own. I have about 3 studios on the floor that I use. And people love the freedom of discovering this light on their own. So that's what's exciting about it.
So the other studios are different in what sense? The window configurations, or
they're both painting studios. So the light is a little more cut. It's a little more blocked out, so it's more directional. And painters like to see a harder shadow. So My light's pretty broad, except I'm planning on getting curtains so that I can shape it when I need to. But the painters whose spaces I use, and I think actually all the painters on the floor, there are 4 painters, they all can shape the light with curtains. And they bring it up from the bottom and they bring it up from the side. They want a smaller piece of light, which is a little more contrasty. And they want a little more from the top.
Yeah, well, you can even do like in that one studio we were going to see, where there's basically a big Matthews stand with the gobo arm on it, and that's your big flag.
Exactly. Just blocking the light to create a little more interest in the direction of the light.
Cool.
Yeah.
So what is there out there for people to discover like this? Are there other places like this for them?
Are there other places in terms of workshops or rental spaces?
Well, where people can have a workshop and experience that. I mean, that must have been a certain draw for people to come to your workshops, right?
I think it is. I don't think there are many workshops like this. And I was a little joking, but I'm pretty sure that there aren't many. Now there are daylight studios around the country, and I'm sure that people are starting to do this, and I might not just know about them. But in Manhattan, I don't know of any. This location is a fantastic location. It's Union Square West. It's Broadway and 17th, so it's super accessible. And it's for a while I worried that the space was kind of too small, that it should be bigger, like a Milk Studio or a Pier 59 or Jack, something big. And I realized that the uniqueness of the light is the smallness of the studio. And I sort of looked back at a book that you and I know and love very well by Irving Penn called World in a Small Room. And I realized that it's part of the look is just the same way that the painters are cutting their light. They're making this kind of a smaller space. And in the same way, this already is a small space, and the light is more directional and a little more contrasty because of that. In the same way that Penn's Worlds in a Small Room created the same light.
Yeah,
and Peter Lindbergh does the same thing. There are lots of photographers shooting, contemporary photographers shooting that are doing this. When you mentioned workshops, there are very few workshops, I think, that do daylight studio or daylight studio workshops, but there's certainly people shooting this in this light.
Yeah, you've also mentioned you've got a lot of photographers coming in here to rent your space.
I do. I'm starting to get more photographers to rent it. I don't rent it a lot, about half a dozen times a month, and that's been great. Just to have people discover this place in the middle of Manhattan is pretty exciting. That's been a great way to meet new photographers too.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I mean, I remember when I first walked in here, I thought, wow, it's a lot smaller than I thought. And how do you just get it done in such a small space? But it's all you need, really. I mean, you don't have to back off that much. You don't need a long lens,
You could. I mean, it's a great place for a beauty portrait or, 85 or 100.
Yeah, but that's what I was thinking. That's basically all you would need.
Yeah.
Right, is a 100 or 150.
Exactly. Yeah. Oh, it's again, I thought I'd need a bigger space, but it's a perfect size space, I think, for portraits, even 1 or 2 people, even 3 people. It's stellar.
That's cool.
Yeah.
So, Andy, what makes a good picture?
I have no idea. If I knew, I would tell you. I was assisting a shoot years ago with the photographers were shooting Louis Malle. And so in a break, I sort of quietly asked him, he was a super lovely guy, so what is it that makes a good movie? And he said, I have absolutely no idea. Been doing this for many, many years. If I knew, every movie I would make would be a winner. But they aren't, and I don't know. So what makes a good picture? I don't know. I think there certainly is a craft. There's certainly elements that we kind of look for. And if it's color, it's a little different from black and white, but it's compositional and exposure and light and dark and color palettes coming together. But I think there's something that we all look for and hope for that is going to happen in a picture that we maybe discover in an edit. Sometimes I think you'll see it when you shoot it, and wow, that's the one. But sometimes you don't know till later.
Hmm.
I think there's nothing wrong with that. Even putting stuff aside and looking at it later, coming back to it with new eyes, I think it has a different appeal, different look.
I notice you're also, I mean, we talked about when you were on earlier, when we were talking about from Minox to Polaroid 2024, that you love film a lot, even though you shoot digital as well. But you do shoot a lot of Polaroid. You have this interesting stash of Polaroid.
What little I have left, I mean, I have 2 refrigerators of it, and it seems to be dwindling, but it's mostly the Fuji Polaroid, or Fuji Instant Film is what it's called. And I have some Polaroid, but not much. It's just, I think it's just becoming more and more popular. You have to buy it used, or that someone stored on eBay, because it's not manufactured anymore, even old Polaroid. And it just has a pastel color palette. It has a mystery. You don't know what's going to happen. It's sort of about the excitement of not knowing.
Mm. And peeling it off just in the old way. It just is still just as exciting as a picture coming up in a developing tray, I think. You know, it's just extraordinary, I think. So I still love to do it, and I think it rephotographs well with a digital camera or with an iPhone. Mm-hmm. It scans beautifully. But you know, it's this stuff. There's a time limit. The stuff's disappearing. It looks great with an iPhone, even.
It looks amazing.
It's an interesting confluence of technological eras.
Totally, but it has a softness. It just has a painterly softness. It's not hyper sharp. It's not ones and zeros.
Mm-hmm. Right.
It just has something that
it's the alchemy.
Feels more emotional.
I guess
the alchemy. Yeah. It's just coming together.
Yeah. Well, I think I might have an idea about what might help to make a good picture.
Yes. Are you telling?
Like this.
Shooting in here. I have to tell you, I don't think you can take a bad picture in here. I mean, that's also part of the secret.
Yeah.
I have, I'm a huge fan of 3/4 light. I just think the 3/4 and side light, and even the flat light, the light in here is soft and lovely, kind, interesting, emotional, changing. When it gets really dark, it gets really interesting. It'll be in slower shutter speeds, wider apertures, color shifts.
Yeah.
Maybe some movement. That's an exciting period when the light gets super low, I think. And most people, no, I can't shoot in low light. No, it's pretty exciting.
How do you deal with digital for color balance in a daylight studio like this, where the light is, skews more cool? How do you just do a basic auto white balance in a daylight studio? What do you do?
Well, I mean,
5500?
Yeah, but I mean, I'll
let it go where it goes.
Sort of. I mean, I'm happy to shoot an auto white balance. That doesn't bother me. When I process something that's going to be a bigger use and more important in a way, and then I want to control it, I'll process and correct the color certainly later in a raw file. Yep. But as a starting point, on a blue sky day, it's 7,000 to 9,000 K. Right now, it's overcast and it's probably pretty close to 55. True daylight. Yeah. So I like to use the odd presets in my camera frequently. I'll use sunshine mode because it's just a little warmer than auto white balance. If it's really blue, I'll even go to the electronic flash mode. I'll kind of go into the ones that I'm not supposed to use because I think they look more interesting. At the same time, shooting tungsten mode in here, it's so gorgeous. Yeah. It's a super beautiful blue. And this gray goes blue.
We've seen a number of your pictures in that. Yeah, there was a nude from the back.
Oh, right.
That's very, very cool.
Super blue.
Really cool.
So so my starting points are kind of auto white balance, or maybe the sunshine preset or electronic flash. But at first I didn't like the blue, but I really like the blueness of the studio now. Really, the blueness of North Light is really, really pretty, I think.
Cool.
Yeah.
Well, I certainly encourage anybody who loves shooting in New York to come and stop by and take a workshop and check out your studio and rent it if they have a gig. And thanks for having us in.
Of course.
And letting us look over your shoulder, doing during your shoots today. And thanks again. Really
Hey, man,
appreciate
you're
it.
so welcome. Anytime.
And give
Please.
yourself a shout out. What's the people want to find you? What's the best
My
way?
Instagram is Andrew French Photographer. The studio is just being built up now. That's a French studio. And the workshops are Andrew French Workshops. It's
Okay.
all on Instagram.
Great.
Yeah.
Terrific.
Jim, thanks so much.
Thanks again, Andy. Appreciate it.
You're welcome. See you later.
See ya.
Thanks for tuning in. Join us next time for another edition of ZEISS Full Exposure. If you can't watch, you can always catch the audio-only version on iTunes, Spotify, or wherever you get your favorite podcasts. Follow us on Instagram at ZEISS_full exposure or on the web at ZEISSfullexposure.com. And to learn more about the latest in ZEISS lenses, head to ZEISS.com.